I think the economists should get out of their ivory towers and come into the real world is what they should do.
Welcome back to Moose and Loose. Today we've got Danielle Smith. She calls out Justin Trudeau publicly on the carbon tax, on his bad policies for Canada, and we've got the numbers here to back it up. So let's jump into this. So first off, we've got this here. It says, your carbon tax is crippling us. Smith calls out Trudeau. And basically this was done on a Twitter post here, which we've got. It says, this is, you can see Danielle Smith's Twitter, Prime Minister, Canadians don't believe this. So this is in reference to here. I'll read Trudeau's Twitter post. It says, unless you pollute an awful lot, you're getting more money back through the Canada carbon rebate than you pay. So conservative politicians would scrap the price on pollution and your rebate. We all know this rebate's a big joke, and anyone in Quebec and BC, we don't get the rebates, even though we've been paying these taxes for a decade plus, 2 decades almost. So Danielle Smith, she said, Prime Minister, Canadians don't believe this. Your carbon tax is crippling us, making everything more expensive. The cost of fuel, less food in the shopping cart, and extra fees on our utility bills. Even your own parliamentary budget officer confirms that this tax will devastate Canada's economy, costing billions and pushing families into further hardship. This tax needs to go. We've seen this across Canada. Canadians are not doing too well. And so we've got a few words here. We've got multiple clips, and let's jump into some charts. So first off, we've got Danielle Smith asked here on the Cpac about climate change and the policies.
In addition, the issues were raised about the clean energy regulations, yes, clean electricity regulations, emissions caps. Yeah. But when you look at the working document communique, it's immediately followed by concerns about climate change, if you will, and natural disasters. So if Ottawa looks at the criticism of those policies, they could also point, could they not, to the fact that this is all tied to climate change.
What I think the premiers are beginning to see is we tried a carbon tax. We tried a retail carbon tax to see if it would reduce emissions. And in point of fact, it hasn't. The things that have been successful in reducing emissions are things like we've done in Alberta, converting from coal to natural gas that reduced emissions 53%, having methane rules so that we were capturing methane from venting, that reduced emissions 45%. It's going to be the big investments from large companies who are producing large amounts of emissions with new technology to do abatement. That's what's going to make a real difference. And then using those technologies and exporting them to the world. We're talking right now with the federal government about how we might be able to create a pathway to participate in the markets in South Korea and Japan because they're seeking ammonia. They want to be able to do dual combustion, have ammonia and coal at the same time to bring emissions down. We know with LNG export, it will have that same effect of displacing global emissions. We know that developing out our hydrogen economy as well, whether it's adding it to home heating or whether it's using it as a transportation fuel, that'll reduce emissions as well. So I think that the premiers are coming to the conclusion that there's different and better ways to reduce emissions, and it doesn't require things like carbon taxes.
We've also got this clip here of Danielle Smith talking on the carbon tax.
So 100% of people can be on electric vehicle. It can't happen. So we're at a point now where people understand that we want to move towards emissions reduction. But then let's start working on the things that we need to do to build out the options for consumers. In the meantime, it's just punishment. People see it. They know they can't avoid it. They know that it's an extra tax. They know it's hurting them, and they don't want it.
So what would you say to the economists, though? I mean, they have these studies. They went through all the list of where it does work and why it works.
Well, they should missing
their knowledge.
I think the economists should get out of their ivory towers and come into the real world. Is what they should do. They should tell me how charging some mom who wants to take her child to a soccer game, how that's reducing CO2 emissions. They should tell the fisherman how him having to pay an extra carbon tax to take his gear down to the dock, how is that reducing carbon emissions? That's the problem, is that it's not working because the infrastructure isn't there yet. The options aren't there yet. What the federal government should do is work with us on building the infrastructure. Help us build out the hydrogen economy. We just announced our first hydrogen fueling station. We have 100 hydrogen vehicles in our market. We have a dual fuel vehicle that has made the trip between Calgary and Edmonton once. That's the nature of where we find ourselves at this precise moment with infrastructure. And that's what we need to build out. We need to make sure that the federal government is working with us on the things that are actually going to work, rather than continuing to punish our consumers.
Hydrogen fuel vehicles, is that the future? I keep hearing about the hydrogen, but it doesn't seem to be getting much traction. Is that the future? Who knows? Let me know in the comments down below. You guys think that's the future? At the very least, the hydrogen feels like it's very early days right now. Looking at some numbers here, we've got Alberta's quarterly population growth. Something happened here. Did someone increase the population in Canada? We've got this one here. Housing starts have been well below the demographic demand. We can see here, this red line is the demographic demand. This is the amount of people coming into Canada. You can see here, the world event happened here. We've got 2023, and we're halfway through 2024, which means we're up here now. And this blue line is the housing starts. They're actually going down. So that's why we have such a bad problem with our housing prices in Canada. We've got this one here, which is Canada's population growth percentage from a year ago, and something happened here. Does anyone know? Does anyone? Hands up, anyone? So you can combine the population growth with what Danielle Smith's message here to Trudeau is with the carbon tax. We get it. Trudeau put in a carbon tax, increased the amount of people. That's a lot more money coming into the government. Congrats. You found a way to bring in a lot more tax dollars to fund the government. Unfortunately, it's not good for Canadians. And this whole situation obviously has now spurred up a whole bunch of climate change this, climate change that. We've even got this post here. CTV News, days getting longer because of climate change, according to NASA. Really, the days are getting longer. I'm not a scientist, but I find that a little bit suspect that somehow climate change on this tiny planet would have any effect with the sun and the universe, the rotations, the spinning, all of that. I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below. We've got this here. Carbon tax revenue, top 15 countries. France is the highest here, and just below France is us. We're winning at something. And then all these other countries, not even close. We take a look at this article. It says Canada's economic implosion, a warning for Australia. So Australia is starting to take some signs from us. And this is a real big one here. Let's see if we can make this bigger for you guys. This graph here says it all. We've got Canada's population surged past prior projections. Now, I showed you the previous chart there with population, but this one really shows it because it shows the projection outwards. We've got a high growth scenario, which is this dotted blue line. We've got medium growth, which is the red, and low growth, which means we're still growing, but low growth. And then this red is actual. So you can see here that divergence happened between 2021 and 2022 and projecting out to 2030. Now, remember, if Trudeau wins the next election, which will be the end of 2025, October-ish, that would put him 4 years out to basically 2030. So this is, if Trudeau stays in power, this is where we'll be. Well, look at this projected growth. I mean, we added 1.4 million, as it says here, last year. We're already off the charts. So just look at this. If we go to 2030 at this projected rate, like we're off my page here. You can't even see it. And I calculate it's going to be about 50 million. 50 million. We're going to have 15 people to a house. Like, there's no other way to say it. There's no space for people to live in houses when you bring in an extra... I mean, we're at 41 now, right? An extra 10 million people in the next 5-6 years. It's crazy. The government knows these numbers, but they've chosen to do this. This is what they have chosen as their plan, their strategy, their policy. So we look further, we got this chart here, which basically we've got non-permanent is in the red, and then the blue is the other. So, and then natural increase, which is this gray, and you'll see it is just dwindling almost to nothing now. Interesting times in Canada. This one here shows the meteoric rise in rent costs. So this is the world event here, and this is afterwards. Anytime I see online postings of rentals, I'll see these increases, and it's just every month it's going up like another $200, $300, $400. It's crazy. We got this one here. It shows labor productivity going down and an effect of population surge on productivity. This is straight from Statistics Canada. This one here really just says it all. This is the Canadian per capita GDP. Right when Trudeau got in, 2015 to now, nothing has changed. Sure, it's gone up and it's gone down, but it's essentially exactly the same. For if you look at America, their graph would be up here, like way up here. They're always just dominating. This one here shows the rise in unemployment. You can see the numbers going up. Now, if we look at the bottom here, it's got some numbers for Australia, and you can see their amount of people coming in also spiking. This is their housing versus the population change. Housing is this gray line going down, population going up. So Australia is seeing the exact same problems. They're just, I don't know, a year or two behind us. Capital stock per person going down. We've got GDP going down. They're seeing the exact same thing. They're just lagging behind us. On the topic of climate change and policy in Canada, we also have this clip here, which was from the Jordan Peterson podcast I showed a couple days ago. This is a different clip from that. So let's take a look at this, where basically Danielle Smith calls it out in regards to Canadian farmers.
I wonder if they've gone a step too far now, though, on attacking agriculture, because they've been waiting to do this. And I've been watching this for some time. I've been giving speeches for years telling our beef farmers as well as our other food producers that they started with a campaign against coal. They shifted to a campaign against fracking. They shifted again to a campaign against oil sands. Now they're shifting again to food production. And they were very delighted after COP28 to say, oh, good, we finally got food on the table. And I remember reading an article from an extreme environmental website decrying the fact that 80% of food production comes from fossil fuel energy. They need fossil fuels to be able to operate their equipment and be able to get the grain to market and do all the transportation. But when you attack our food producers, it dramatically backfires. Look what happened in the Netherlands. Denmark, I have just read, is now putting a tax on belching and flatulating cattle, $100 carbon tax on cows.
This is true. So it's $100 per cow. They're putting a carbon tax on their cows. Each cow, $100. Absolutely crazy. And so what she mentions here next is, well, when does that come to people then? Because eventually there would be a tax on every one of us for breathing.
And you have to wonder, at what point are people going to say enough is enough? Because I'll have to tell you, like, the next logical step is, if belching and farting and breathing is now a sin, how long before they start putting a carbon tax on human beings? Because guess what? We're all belching and farting and breathing creatures as well. So I think they may have overplayed their hand in going after our food producers. Our food producers are some of our most highest esteemed industries and professionals in any economy, certainly far above lawyers and used car salesmen and politicians. And so to go after our food producers in this way, it doesn't make sense, especially since the entire practice of food production is understanding the carbon cycle. When you have a grain that you're producing, you have to capture CO2 from the air. It goes into the head of that grain. People eat it, and then it gets recycled again. The entire process of food production works with the carbon cycle. And so for them to be attacking the very nature of food production and how the carbon cycle works, I think they've gone too far. I think it's one thing to apply this weird paradigm on industry. I just don't think that they can carry it over to food production without having the kind of outcomes that we're seeing around the world, where farmers are pushing back and people are pushing back.
She got it right there. The food is everything. I mean, look what the basic necessity is here of life. If you've watched any one of those TV shows where they drop off people in the middle of nowhere and then they have to survive, you just get a different sense of life, where these people are going out and setting traps and snares and all this kind of thing, and they spend so much time looking for fruit in trees and just trying to find clean water. I mean, that's what our food producers are. These are the people who go out and work every day. So, because you can't take days off when you have crops. Like, you have to go water the corn. You have to go, and sure, they have automated systems and stuff, but you have tractors and things that go through there to do all that stuff. You have to go do the work every single day. You can't take a month off because you want to. Otherwise, nobody gets to eat. So our food producers are the most important people in our society. So as she said, to go after them, they've overplayed their hand. It was a bad move, and it basically exposed, they're not in it for us. They're in it for themselves, their own agenda, whatever that is, global, WF, whatever it may be, but they've overplayed their hand. Looking in the comments, we've got appreciate this woman. Right on, Danielle. There's still some common sense left in this world. I love this woman. Go, Danielle. Farmers and truckers. Yeah, truckers too. Like, the world does not happen without truckers. Truckers take things everywhere. And it seems kind of obvious, but when you start looking into the numbers and all the data, it is crazy how the entire world is dependent on the truckers moving things around. Otherwise, nothing would happen. Big shout out to the truckers. You're amazing. It's a hard job to do, no doubt. Same thing with farmers. Like, without these two, We got nothing. They've gone overboard on all their policies. Yeah. Smith for prime minister. Interesting. That won't be happening anytime soon. We're all on board with Pierre Poilievre, but who knows? Maybe in 10 years from now or whatever, maybe Danielle Smith makes a run for prime minister. We'll see. Now jumping over to equalization payments, as that was mentioned among all of this. We've got this here. So also posted by Danielle Smith, which was actually retweeted from Scott Moe. The West here is starting to team up because they don't get anything. They all have to pay. And you can see here, Quebec, $13.3 billion. So Newfoundland, Labrador too, they're having to pay out money, $218 million, but their population is so low. Like, this system needs to be, redone. It just doesn't make sense anymore. Great to see cooperation in the West. Just stop paying. Yeah, I wonder what happened with that, because it's like the carbon tax situation with Saskatchewan. Just don't pay equalization payments? Why does Quebec get so much money? I mean, that's a good question. It all comes down to the math of it, but then if Quebec's able to generate a ton of money from their own natural gas and they're not choosing to, I think that should limit the amount of equalization payment they get. It just makes sense. I mean, they're basically refusing to take the bread off the table that's right there for them, and then they're asking someone else to get some bread off of their plate. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it seems to be another conclusion emerging has to do with the equalization program, because the criticism around that was not just one province, two provinces, it was several provinces expressing concerns around equalization. Is it time to have a First Ministers' Conference around that?
Yes, and if we can't get a First Ministers' Conference, of course the difference between this table is that this is just the Premiers. A First Ministers' Conference includes the Prime Minister. Barring that, I'd like to see our table come together and propose changes to equalization, because I don't think it was ever envisioned that a small population province like Newfoundland and Labrador would be a net payer, and large population provinces like Ontario and Quebec would be net recipients like they were last year.
So we're talking about equalization payments in Canada here, and Andrew Furey has spoken up about this. Basically, they generate good revenue and they are having to pay into this, even though they have such a small population. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, because a lot of their bigger infrastructure, like hospitals or whatever, cost a lot of money, and they don't have the extra funds to build those things, even though they have to pay equalization payments to Quebec. Quebec, I think, gets the most out of any in Canada. And then I mentioned this a couple videos ago. Quebec, they have the natural gas to be very prosperous, but they're not using it. They just relied solely on hydro, and when really they could be absolutely crushing it, doing awesome like Alberta is, if they decided to develop out their natural gas. So they're refusing to do that, yet Newfoundland is making payments, which essentially goes to Quebec. It doesn't make sense.
That to me is just a fundamental problem with the formula. It's badly broken, because I think the idea behind it is that small population provinces may not have the resources in the tax base to be able to pay for the same level of services. We want to make sure there's continue to be supported, but I'm pretty hard pressed to think that Ontario and Quebec don't have the fiscal capacity. They should, and that's part of the conversation we need to have. We're over equalizing certain provinces, and we're also not considering all of the sources of revenue that they have, and that's part of the reason why the formula is so broken. So if we can have that conversation at this table, and then maybe invite the Prime Minister in once we've come to some kind of consensus, that might be the best way forward.
So next up, we've got blurry-faced Andrew Furey here, and he has his words on the equalization payments. Newfoundland, Labrador. As
I say, a number of provinces have raised their eyebrows with what you're doing, because they too are interested in equalization, revisiting it. Scott Moe of Saskatchewan, he suggests taking the whole kitty, dividing it in half, distribute 50% based on per capita, and then the other 50% based on the current formula. What do you think of that?
Look, I don't have an opinion about how it should be revised. Our challenge is to bring heightened awareness and perhaps a legal opinion on whether it should be revised. I think there has been no discussion. The last revision was in 2008 under former Prime Minister Harper. There's been no discussion about the formula since that, despite the changing economics, despite the changing population density, demographic issues that have fundamentally changed the construct of the country, yet the formula remains static. So we are using this legal challenge, this public challenge, this policy challenge, not to say what the formula ultimately should be, but to say that it deserves to be revisited, it deserves to be revised.
So he basically goes on to say that if you got places like Ontario that are getting billions of dollars of EV investment through Honda, Stellantis, or whatever, and Newfoundland isn't, well, why are they making payments that go to those provinces, which is a very valid point. The whole system really does need a complete revamp because it doesn't make a lot of sense, at least not today. I'm sure it did back when they set it up and even when they last revised it, I believe in 2008, but not anymore. And even David Eby is not in favor of it.
Is equalization broken?
You know, equalization is one of those topics where, you know, people's eyes can glaze over, and it's always been a grievance of Western provinces and Eastern provinces are working hard to not be as reliant on equalization. Here's my understanding of things. The whole program is designed to ensure that every Canadian has access to a good quality school, to healthcare, to basic services. What the program has become, though, is one where British Columbia taxpayers pay into a central pot that's then distributed to, of all places, Ontario. I cannot fathom why BC taxpayers are sending, in the last 2 years, contributing to sending $1 billion to the province of Ontario. Ontario's not struggling to deliver schools, they're not struggling to deliver healthcare. They're making decisions about their tax base, about how they spend their money. I saw a whole bunch of announcements about buying out a beer store contract. They're doing just fine. But BC taxpayers are struggling with affordability. And so when I look at BC taxpayers supporting Ontarians for some reason, when they're having no difficulty delivering those programs, it strikes me that the program is broken, that it's not working the way it's intended, that it's no longer about services, it's about something else entirely. And
now, I don't disagree with what Eby's saying here, but it's not just equalization payments. The reason why BC is broken, and for anyone who's new to the channel here, I've lived in BC for almost 20 years and all over different parts of BC. The problem of affordability really started around the Christy Clark era. They did not do the right things at that time to protect the housing prices in Canada. They allowed a lot of very wealthy people to come in from the other side of the ocean there and buy up all the properties. That is just the Coles notes of what happened. And now they put in some protective measures, but it's too late. It's too late. And there's a whole bunch of other factors going in there. We'll talk about in other videos, but that's what it comes down to. And so sure, the equalization payments, it doesn't make sense. BC should be keeping our own, but the issues here in BC can be fixed, but this man is not fixing them. He's not fit for this job. He's not doing the right policies. It's evident in the numbers too. His numbers are plummeting in the polls, and it's very likely when we have an election here in October of this year in BC that David Eby will be voted out and the Conservatives will be voted in. Jumping over to my group, let's check out some memes. When you spend $1.3 billion on a study on how to plant trees, but don't plant any, will the real Doogie Howsers step forward? Yeah, it looks like his brother. Before Trudeau, after Trudeau. This screenshot here, she's going to get fired. Yeah, the look on her face. This was maybe from a week ago, this interview. That's when we'll wrap up this episode. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about Danielle Smith calling out Trudeau and the carbon tax, the whole thing. Her words are very to the point, and I could actually see her wanting to potentially run for prime minister. You know, this would be out in the future, not right now, but maybe that's her plan. I don't know. I don't know what her political ambitions are, but we're going to get back to our regular scheduled program here with more memes and all that kind of stuff. If you want to see that right now, you can go over to my second channel, which I'll link up here, because that one is rocking and rolling normal. For this one here, I'm having to upload a whole bunch of videos and then put them into review process, and it can take up to a week, which is not great for a daily news show, but that's where I'm at here with this. So I have to just build up the trust in the system here again. I had one video recently get flagged. I've only had 4 in the last 250 videos, so it seems a little bit ridiculous. We're gonna build up the robots' trust here, and then things should get back to normal. But until then, the more flavorful stuff will be on my second channel, and the more kind of analytical stuff we're gonna be putting here for the next week or two. So thanks for watching the video here. Be sure to subscribe and go over and subscribe to my other channel, because that's where the more fun stuff is right now. We're going to keep fighting for freedom. I'll see you guys in the next one.